Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure and honor for me to be sitting next to Dr. Professor David Engels.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's our pleasure. David Engels is a senior analyst at the Instytucie Zachodnim, as well as an historian and philosopher, who is also the chair of Roman history at the ULB in Brussels. Once again, it's a big pleasure for us to have the opportunity to discuss with you here in our office of the Ordo Iuris Institute. I would like to ask you first question. You are a German-speaking Belgian. How come have you moved to Poland, if we can start with that?
Yeah, there are a couple of reasons. On the one hand, of course, there are some professional reasons. My activities moved more and more from the, let's say, purely ancient historian side of my profession to the analysis of present-day Europe. And so in this respect, I think it was much easier to work also from that perspective from the Instytucie Zachodnim than from Brussels. So I was very grateful when I was offered this job opportunity. And on the other hand, it is so terribly agreeable to live in Poland. Poland is such a normal country in comparison to what the West of Europe, unfortunately, has become in the recent decades. So it's a very great place to educate children, to tend to your house, to see colleagues, to live in without all that political, ideological pressure, and also, unfortunately, insecurity, criminality, and so forth that are so characteristic of the country or parts of the country I'm coming from, that is Belgium.
Yeah, I would like to bounce on what you just said. You mentioned ideological climate, if I can say in that way. As a university professor, how would you compare or how would you assess the academic freedom if you would compare, for example, Belgium, where you're from, and the reality here in Poland?
Mm-hmm. Well, all is not well, of course, in Poland, unfortunately, when it comes to the evolution of academia. We know that also in Poland there is a very strong left-leaning tendencies in many universities that is a fact, but we are still very far from what I and many of my colleagues have experienced in Western Europe. In the West, there's an enormous pressure that is put on intellectuals, and especially public intellectuals. From the moment onward, you are not within a leftist liberal ideological doxa, but you express things like a certain commitment to your belief in God, to your love for your country or for the European civilization as such. You are or for your support for basic social institutions like the traditional family, for example, or the right to live, things like that. Then you are immediately labeled as right-wing, extremist, whatever, and that makes it very difficult, of course, to survive, to publish, to talk to your students, to live with many of your colleagues. So there's an enormous pressure, and the current day academic system, especially of Western Europe, is built not anymore on lifelong positions, but on short-term positions that take 2 years, 5 years, and where you need all the time to be reassessed, to prove your commitment also to certain ideological standards. And once you express yourself in favor of more conservative ideas, then it becomes extremely difficult to continue to live within your own job. That is something that has luckily and unfortunately not yet arrived to such a degree in Poland, but I see its beginnings here very clearly. On the other hand, we see in Western Europe that, especially in France, there are new institutions that are created that are trying to provide semi-private university education to conservative students. So there is some form of resilience, but it is slow in coming, and let's hope it is not too late.
Then you may guess my upcoming question once we talk about these new universities which are starting to be created, among others in Poland. And of course, I'm referring to Collegium Intermarium, the university which was recently launched here in Warsaw, which has the ambition of forming these young people from across Central Europe mainly. You have been a lecturer for the Collegium Intermarium. How has your experience been, and how does your collaboration with that university work on right now?
Yeah, well, lecture is perhaps a big word, as I just gave a block lecture, so I couldn't say I have a full experience, of course, of the everyday reality of the Collegium Intermarium, but from what I've seen until now, I'm really, let's say, extremely motivated to participate in this initiative, and I think that is absolutely what we need, not only in Poland but also in Europe. I've been involved in many, let's say, initiatives like that, like for example the ICES in France, at La Roche-sur-Yon, like also partly the Bibliothèque des Conservatismus in Berlin, like the also in Hungary, the Matthias Corvinus College. So, and I see with great pleasure that everywhere there's some form of resilience that is building up, and I'm happy that now we too in Poland, thanks to the Collegium Intermarium, we have such an instrument that is slowly starting to become more well known. And from what I've seen, be it the colleagues, be it the localities, be it also the students, I'm very optimistic that this may become one of the important hubs of conservatism. But of course, it would need all the support it can get, and it needs also to invest a lot in pushing its activities and accelerating its work, because there's just one thing we do not have as conservatives or as traditionalists in Europe, and that is time. Time is playing against us for the moment, that if we want to build up alternative education facilities, then we really need to rush and to do as much as possible before it will be too late.
Yeah, if we leave for a moment university as such on the side and look more broadly, what you've mentioned, this fight back or this backlash against these ideological threats is or seems to be pretty necessary. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things that we here at the Ordo Iuris Institute are busy with. For 10 years now, it's our 10th anniversary. I was wondering how have you got to know our institute? In which context? How did it look like?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to think about that. I think it has been a couple of years that I had been invited, that I had met some of the organizers at a private party here in Warsaw, and then afterwards I had been invited to collaborate on a certain number of projects. So, if my memory serves me right, I assisted or spoke at one or two conferences. I did some interviews also with the staff here, and of course I came to collaborate with Ordo Iuris on the Collegium Intermarium thing, especially of course the inauguration ceremony where I organized the panel essentially for them. So this is an on and off relation that is taking now a couple of years or 3 or 4 years since I'm living here basically in Warsaw. Until now I've only made very, very, very good experiences with all the people I've known here, and I've really learned to appreciate the professionality of the work that is being done here. And especially, of course, the strong moral and Christian commitment of this organization that in a large part also tries to defend basic moral, decent values such as the right to live, such as the right to die somehow, that is to live your life in the entire cycle of natural law against all these attacks that is coming from transhumanism, that is coming from these very weird anti-humanist tendencies to put the human being into a chimerical full control of its own existence that can only lead to monstrous things such as the incredible number of abortions every year, or the move on euthanasia, or the politics against disabled children and babies, all that kind of things. So I'm really happy that there are institutions like Ordo Iuris who, from a juridical point of view, are trying to fight back and to fight basically for the human being as it is, as a creation of God.
You have written a series of books where you try to, on the one hand, formulate a sort of analysis of what is wrong currently with the European Union and Europe, broadly speaking, and on the other hand, providing some formulas, some propositions, how to fix this before it's too late. As you mentioned, time is not on our side. That would be a broad question, but I'm curious to know from you what is the essence of the European civilization? What are the challenges, the main challenges we are facing today, and how to tackle them, in your opinion?
Yeah, that is indeed a very large question. Well, when it comes to define what it means to be European, of course, we can have a historical approach. We can speak about the Jewish, the Greek, the Roman heritage and Christianity and so forth. But more, let's say, to the center, I would say that there are two aspects that are central from my point of view in what it means to be European. On the one hand, that is the belief in transcendence, the belief in the existence of God, and the belief that there is something like an immortal soul, and that our main responsibility is not towards our social environment, but to our Creator, and when it comes also, and especially to the salvation of our soul. And I think the specific form this belief in transcendence has been given in the European civilization is Christianity. So Christianity is somehow the soul of this European civilization, and from the moment on, the civilization rejects its Christian heritage, rejects its strive for transcendence, then basically it kills itself. That is one point. The other point that is perhaps also a bit more typical for Europe, especially as other civilizations are also striving for transcendence, that is of course what has been often called this Faustian drive. So the wish of the European man to reach the horizon, to reach out, to go further, to discover what is behind the horizon. So exactly this impetus that has led us to build things like the Gothic cathedrals, or to send men to the moon, for example. This relentless strive that has its good sides, obviously, that has also its downsides, because there is this typically Western arrogance that is somehow part of our civilization, so for the best and for the worse. And unfortunately, much of this hubris that we are seeing today in our de-Christianized society is still based on this Faustian drive, but it is turning itself against itself. And so that explains, of course, this enormous crisis we are in, and that leads to what has been called the suicide of the West. Our crisis today is, I believe, essentially an identity crisis. It is a typical crisis for an old civilization, of course. Many old civilizations go or have gone through similar evolutions, but this is of course our time, this is our life, and now we are in this situation. That explains also the ways we can try to fight against this decline. And that is of course again tying back to transcendence, again putting into the middle of our interest not any form of chimerical social utopia that is just constructed on relativism and in the end nihilism, but something that is constructed on our belief in our immortal soul, and that our main responsibility is not for social justice, but that our main responsibility is above and all for living up to this commitment of being part of a certain divine nature. I think tying back to Christianity is, I think, one of the main ways we can at least hope to help at least some Europeans to discover again the true heart of their own identity. And the other one is, of course, being or becoming aware again that our history in large parts is also defined by this strive for transcendence, and that we need to protect the memory and to cherish all the forms where our ancestors have gone the same way, and not practice any form of cancel culture where we think that we ourselves in the 21st century are so superior to all the others, but rather again enter some form of loyalty, of fidelity towards what has been given to us by our ancestors, becoming again solidary with our past. And I think that would be a second means of going back. Of course, there are a lot of other, let's say, more technical issues. I've written a lot, let's say, about the European Union and federalism, that kind of thing. But I think for our discussion, that is perhaps a bit more secondary. The true heart is, in my point of view, this wish to go back to transcendence and to establish again a positive and cherishing relationship to all the periods in our past that have been marked by the same elan, if you wish.
Professor, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for the invitation.